Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Doug Lief, and I am the host of the Nostalgium Arcanum podcast. And for this episode of Fun and Games, I want to talk to you all about The Seventh Guest. This is a game that is a so-so game in terms of gameplay, but it is a whole lot of Halloween spooktacular fun, and it sure meant a lot to me when it was first released in 1993 for anything that had a CD-ROM drive. This was, from a technical standpoint, a huge seller, a game that pushed a lot of CD-ROM drive technology because you had to have one in order to play this must-have game. This, alongside Myst, was a huge pusher in terms of moving technology and games and storytelling forward, because this is a game where you inhabit a 3D haunted house filled with FMV ghosts. The Seventh Guest tells the story of Henry Stauf, an evil toy maker who, after a night of drifting and murdering, is given a vision of a toy that he makes and sells, leading to the creation of a toy empire. A Stauf toy is a toy for life, everyone said. Unfortunately, all of the young recipients of these toys began to die for mysterious reasons, leading to Stauf becoming a recluse in his twisted mansion, the last of his great creations. And after a long time in seclusion, he invites 6 guests to his mansion for a dinner party, a classic murder mystery, haunted house type setup. And these 6 strangers are brought to the house and told that if they solve the great mystery that is presented to them that night, that Stauf will grant them a boon, some kind of wish beyond their wildest dreams. And all of these guests are desperate enough to believe. You play the role of an incorporeal entity named Ego, who just finds itself inside the house some untold number of years after that fateful night. When 6 guests arrived, a mysterious 7th guest, hence the title, also arrived, but nobody ever was seen leaving the house again. So in the game, you move through the house. You don't have free roam. At least now, I think in modern versions of this game, you can freely roam about the house. But in 1993, you would click from kind of node to node, and they would use pre-rendered video to give you the feeling of moving through the house. And you would go to the various rooms within the mansion, and inside you would find a puzzle. Now, the puzzles are not like they are in Myst, where they are integrated into the environment, where say, for example, there is a door with a complex locking mechanism, and elsewhere in the house is perhaps a book with some information that leads you to decode what you need to in order to open the door. That's a Myst puzzle. The Seventh Guest puzzles are far more simplistic. You walk into a room, and there, sitting out on a bedspread or a table, is literally a chessboard, or a fraction of a chessboard, or a set of playing cards that you have to flip over in a particular order. As you hove your awesome skeleton hand cursor over the puzzle, the cursor will switch to a bulging brain, and you click that, and that means it's puzzle time. And so your view will zoom in on the puzzle, and you will set about clicking it with your what's now a rolling eyeball cursor that lets you know it's time to move things around. So, for example, one of the first puzzles you encounter in the game is a cake that is divided into something like 24 slices of cake in a grid pattern, and each of the slices has a different, either it's blank or it has a tombstone or a skull or something on it. And the goal is to carve up a slice for each of the guests that has the same number of tombstones, skulls, and blanks on it. So you just have to carve this thing up in the right shapes. That's kind of a straightforward puzzle in the Seventh Guest. And I believe there's something like 25-ish of puzzles throughout the game, one for each of the major rooms. And I would say maybe a third of them are pretty good. A third of them are just fine, and a third of them are kind of BS. So again, you're not really coming to this for the gameplay. Again, those good puzzles are decent, right? They'll give you an 8x8 chessboard, and you have to place 8 queens on it in such a way that none of the queens is killing any of the other queens. That's fine. That's good as a puzzle. Some of them are inscrutable. Some of them are just annoying. There's one that's basically a piano where you play a follow the leader as you have to click on the notes following the game. There are too many notes. The melody they want you to play is too long, and the keys are so small that you are prone to make an error and have to start all over again. So some of the things like that are a little BS. There's also a first-person maze in the basement that you have to do, and other than following the right-hand rule or a guide, that's going to take you a while and is very annoying. However, your incentive to explore is that as you walk into a room for the first time, you will be treated to some FMV scenes of the ghosts of the occupants of the house during that fateful night in question. And these are really fun and campy. The acting is, other than Stauf, who is awesome, these guys are all hamming it up and playing to the rafters. That is largely because back in 93, the technology was such that they could not do highly detailed FMV. So everybody is a little blurry and a little transparent because they're ghosts, which means facial expressions are hard to read if you can see them at all. And that means everything has to be done through sort of grand silent movie type gesticulating and big over the top voices. So I kind of have a big soft spot for this. Your mileage may vary. You might find this cloying and annoying and terrible acting. I think it's pretty fun and campy myself. And so you'll watch a scene, and if you solve the puzzle, then you will be treated to another scene. This means that the story of The Seventh Guest is a little fragmented, to say the least. It's told out of order. If you use the in-game cheat system, there is a hint book in the library that you can use to ultimately skip difficult puzzles if you're having too much trouble. However, if you do that, that means you get a little less of the story, and it becomes even harder to understand. But like any good haunted house, the environment, the exploration of the Stauf Mansion is fantastic. So as haunted houses in media go, it's a whole lot of fun to explore. It is spooky. You will find creepy things in the environment. You will find things to click on where, like, say, a painting might distort and come to life, things like that. As you make your way through it, there are also weird secret passages up and down that are helpful in terms of gameplay, in terms of getting around the mansion, but also pretty just neat in terms of that classic feeling of clicking on something and then the back of the fireplace opens and you can pass through that and find yourself in the upstairs game room. Things like that are pretty cool. There are specters and spooks to be found in this house outside of the primary 8 characters, the 7 guests and Henry Stauf. And of course, Stauf himself is constantly yammering at you, taunting you, especially when you're trying to solve puzzles, and just belittling you throughout the course of your adventure. So that is kind of the primary story of The Seventh Guest. I won't spoil all of the ins and outs of the plot, since that is really the primary joy, is just the joys of walking through a spooky haunted house and having these ghosts reveal themselves to you and what went on in the mansion. Again, especially when some of those things are strange and hard to understand and just very upsetting and weird, but also goofy and fun in plenty of places as well. So is this the greatest game ever? No, far from it. There is also a sequel called The 11th Hour, which is markedly worse. The gameplay is basically the same, but the story is not so good, and there's some kind of notoriously bad stuff in it. You can go YouTube those things if you feel like having the 11th Hour experience, but don't play the whole game. There's also a late sequel called The 13th Doll. That was a Kickstarter type deal that is kind of interesting. I've played a little of it and is far more of a piece with the original game than the 11th Hour is. So that's kind of worth checking out. And I know there recently was a VR like reboot of this game from the ground up, which I have not touched, so I don't know if that's any good or not. But for me, it's the charm of this original thing and the time of kind of enjoying this when it came out in 1993 and feeling like this was really special. This was kind of a period at which games were starting to graduate beyond the limited, run to the right and shoot kind of stuff, or point and clicks that had come before in the 8 and 16-bit era. This was heralding the beginning of technology allowing games to do far more interesting and creative things. And so on that metric, I think The Seventh Guest is a big success, but I think you owe it to yourself to try it. It's a low bar to entry. It's a quick game to complete if you're not too flummoxed by the puzzles, many of which are pretty simple and straightforward. But again, the mood of this, if you're feeling like it's Halloween and you want something kind of, light in terms of gameplay, not nearly as scary as a Resident Evil, not as long, and just sort of, again, a spirit Halloween come to life, I can't recommend The Seventh Guest highly enough. Even with all of its flaws, there is just something delightful about existing in Henry Stauf's spooky mansion. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to this episode of Side Quests. If you want to check out Nostalgium Arcanum, please do. It's a podcast where we look back on pop culture of yesteryear. We interview a guest and find out about that thing that they are still super passionate about. And if you're listening to this, I'm sure you're a fan of Matt Storm, aka Stormageddon, who we've had on the show many times. So if you want to find his episodes, which included one on Chrono Trigger, Super Mario 64, Queen, and Spaceballs, as well as most recently The Nightmare Before Christmas, go check those out. Those would be a good place to start. And if you like the show, leave a review. You can find us on the socials at Nostalgium Arcanum or at Nostalgium Pod in the usual social network places. So those are good places to find our doings and our recordings and such. So thanks again, and happy gaming.
Do you find yourself playing older games and wishing that there were new discussions about those games? Enter Tales from the Backlog. Hi, I'm Dave Jackson, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest to break down those games that may be stuck in your ever-expanding backlog. Each episode looks at one game in depth, focusing on mechanics, story, music, and other aspects with no spoilers until a clearly marked spoiler wall in the middle. If you've played the game, go ahead and climb that spoiler wall and enjoy in-depth story discussions, and if not, jump out when we warn you and maybe go play that game for yourself. We have over 100 episodes in the feed, everything from Disco Elysium to Tunic to discussion episodes about how to get into horror games, and if games actually need to be fun, or if they have more to offer. I guarantee that there's something in there for everybody. Once again, that's Tales from the Backlog, available wherever your podcasts are found.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.